The champagne tray shattered against the marble floor. Before Elena could move, Lorraine Washington's palm cracked across her face with enough force to send her stumbling backward into the banquet table. "You worthless white trash," her mother-in-law hissed, loud enough for every guest to hear. "You don't deserve to breathe the same air as my son." 300 of Atlanta's elite watched in silence. Her husband Marcus didn't even look up from his phone. But what none of them knew, not Marcus, not Lorraine, not the woman currently wearing Elena's engagement ring, was that in exactly 47 minutes, a man would walk through those doors and kneel before the waitress. And by midnight, the Washington Empire would be nothing but ash. Comment below what city you're watching from. Let's see how far this story travels. The slap echoed through the grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton Atlanta like a gunshot. Elena Hartwell's head snapped to the side, her champagne tray clattering to the marble floor in a cascade of crystal and Dom Perignon. The sting spread across her cheekbone like wildfire, but she didn't cry out. She had learned 3 years ago that tears only made it worse. "Look at what you've done!" Lorraine Washington's voice cut through the sudden silence like a serrated knife. "Do you have any idea how much that champagne costs? More than your entire existence, you clumsy, worthless girl." 300 guests stood frozen. Senators, CEOs, old money families from Buckhead to Tuxedo Park, all of them watching the spectacle unfold like it was dinner theater. Elena dropped to her knees, her hands already reaching for the broken glass. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Washington. The tray slipped. Of course it slipped." Lorraine stepped closer, her Chanel heels clicking against the marble like a countdown. "Because you're incompetent. Because my son married incompetent white trash from some coffee shop in Seattle, and now I have to explain to my guests why my daughter-in-law is serving drinks, instead of standing beside her husband like a proper wife." "Lorraine, please." "That's Mrs. Washington to you." The older woman's eyes were cold as marble tombstones. "Or better yet, don't address me at all. Just clean up your mess and stay invisible. That's what you're good at, isn't it? Being invisible." Elena's fingers closed around a shard of crystal. It bit into her palm, a thin line of blood welling up, but she didn't flinch. She had endured worse. So much worse. "Yes, Mrs. Washington." "Mama, that's enough." Elena's heart lifted for one desperate second at the sound of her husband's voice. Marcus Washington was walking toward them, tall and commanding. His custom Tom Ford tuxedo fitting his athletic frame like it had been sewn directly onto his body. He was beautiful. He had always been beautiful, with his warm brown skin and easy smile that had made her fall in love with him 4 years ago in that coffee shop. But the man approaching wasn't the Marcus she had married. That man had died somewhere between the wedding and the first time his mother made Elena scrub the bathroom floor on her hands and knees. "Marcus," Elena started to rise. "Please, can you help me?" "Don't make a scene, Elena." His voice was flat bored. He didn't look at her. He was checking his Patek Philippe watch. "Mama's stressed. The gala's important. If we don't close this deal with the Cole family tonight, the stock drops 20%. I'm your wife, Marcus. I'm supposed to be beside you tonight, not serving champagne in a uniform." Marcus finally looked at her. His eyes traveled over the black skirt and white button-down shirt of the catering staff, and something flickered across his face. Not shame, not guilt. Annoyance. "Elena, we talked about this. Jasmine Cole is here. Her family is investing $200 million in Washington properties. It would be awkward if you were standing next to me while I'm networking with her." Networking. Elena felt her chest tighten. "Is that what you're calling it now? Watch your tone." Lorraine stepped between them, her finger jabbing toward Elena's face. "You should be grateful we even allow you in the building. If it were up to me, you'd be back in Seattle serving lattes to homeless people." "Mama?" "No, Marcus. She needs to hear this." Lorraine's voice dropped to a venomous whisper, but it carried across the silent ballroom. "I told you 3 years ago that this marriage was a mistake. I told you she was nothing but a gold digger who saw your family's money and spread her legs, but you didn't listen. You brought this creature into our home." Elena's hands stopped shaking. Something cold settled into her chest, replacing the hurt with something harder. Something that had been building for 1095 days. "I'm not a gold digger, Mrs. Washington." "Then what are you?" Lorraine laughed, a cruel, brittle sound. "A barista, a waitress. A nobody from nowhere who somehow convinced my son to marry her. You contribute nothing to this family. Nothing. You can't even carry a tray without dropping it." "That's enough, Mama." Marcus put a hand on his mother's shoulder, but he was looking past Elena, scanning the crowd. Looking for someone. "Elena, just finish serving and stay in the back. I'll deal with you later." "Deal with me? This isn't the time." Elena stood up slowly, still holding the broken crystal in her bleeding hand. The blood dripped onto the white tablecloth, spreading like a small red flower. "Then when is the time, Marcus? When is it ever the time?" Her voice was quiet but steady. "You haven't touched me in 8 months. You haven't looked at me in longer than that. I sleep in the guest room of our own house while your mother tells everyone I have separate quarters because of my condition." "Elena." "What condition, Marcus?" "The condition of being your wife. The condition of loving you." "This is exactly what I'm talking about." Marcus's voice hardened. "You're emotional. You're embarrassing yourself." He stepped closer, his hand closing around her arm. His grip was tight enough to bruise. "Go to the kitchen. Wash your face. Don't come back out until you can behave like a rational human being." Elena looked at his hand on her arm, at the place where her blood was staining his crisp white cuff. At the man she had crossed an ocean for, who had promised her a life of love and adventure and had delivered 3 years of humiliation and silence. "Let go of me, Marcus." "Or what?" He laughed, that nervous, jerky sound he always made when he knew he was wrong but couldn't admit it. "You'll go back to your minimum wage life. You'll survive without my money. Face it, Elena. You have nothing. You are nothing without the Washington name." "Marcus." A high, bright voice cut through the tension like a champagne cork popping. "There you are. I've been looking everywhere for you." Elena watched Jasmine Cole glide across the ballroom like she owned it. And why wouldn't she? The Cole family's real estate empire stretched from Miami to New York. Jasmine herself was everything Elena wasn't allowed to be loud. Confident, dripping in diamonds, and wearing a red Versace gown cut so low it left nothing to imagination. Jasmine. Marcus's entire demeanor shifted. His grip on Elena's arm loosened as his face transformed into the charming smile that had captured Elena's heart all those years ago. "You look stunning." "I know, right?" Jasmine giggled, tossing her hair. Then her eyes landed on Elena, and her smile curdled into something ugly. "Oh, is this the wife, the one you told me about?" "This is Elena." Marcus's voice was flat again. "She's helping with the catering tonight." "Helping with the—" Jasmine's laugh was like breaking glass. "Oh my God, Marcus, you weren't joking. She really does look like the help." She looked Elena up and down with grotesque amusement. "I mean, I've seen your photos, but honey, you look so much more plain in person. How tragic." Elena said nothing. She just stood there, blood dripping from her hand, watching the woman who had been sleeping with her husband for the past 6 months make jokes at her expense. "Jasmine, don't be cruel," Marcus said, but he was smiling. "Elena's doing her best. She just needs to know her place." "Oh, I'm sure she does." Jasmine stepped closer to Elena, close enough that her perfume, Chanel No. 5. Elena noticed the same perfume that lingered on Marcus's shirts when he came home at 3 a.m. was overwhelming. "Tell me, sweetie, does it hurt, watching your husband move on to a real woman, someone who actually belongs in his world?" "Jasmine?" Marcus started. "No, really, I want to know." Jasmine's smile was razor sharp. What's it like being so forgettable that your own husband doesn't remember you exist? Elena met Jasmine's eyes, held them, let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. I'll let you know, Elena said quietly, when I find out. Jasmine blinked, her smile faltering for just a second. Then she recovered, linking her arm through Marcus's. Whatever. Come on, baby. Your mama wants us to meet the senator from Alabama. Apparently he's interested in our development project. Marcus let himself be led away without a backward glance. Elena watched them go, watched her husband's hand drop to Jasmine's waist, watched Lorraine Washington beam at the couple like they were the answer to all her prayers. Mrs. Washington. Elena turned. One of the catering managers was standing behind her, looking uncomfortable. Yes. The presidential suite room 847 needs fresh champagne. Mrs. Washington Sr. requested you deliver it personally. Of course she did, because the humiliation in the ballroom wasn't enough. Lorraine wanted Elena to serve her directly, wanted to remind her one more time exactly where she stood in this family. I'll be right there, Elena said. She walked to the service station, loaded a new tray with fresh glasses of Dom Perignon, and headed toward the elevator. Her hand was still bleeding, leaving small red drops on the silver tray, but she didn't stop to bandage it. The service elevator was empty and quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos of the ballroom. Elena leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. 3 years. 3 years of this. Of being called worthless and clumsy and white trash. Of sleeping alone in a cold bed while her husband found warmth elsewhere. Of smiling and nodding and pretending that someday, somehow, Marcus would remember why he married her. He never did. She had come to America with nothing but hope and a tourist visa and a dream of finding someone who loved her for who she was, not for what she represented. Her father's dying wish had been clear. Find someone who loves Genevieve, the person, not Genevieve the princess. Find someone pure. She had found Marcus, and Marcus had found her money. He didn't know, of course. None of them knew. That was the point of the experiment. Go into the world anonymously. Find true love. Her father's last test for his only daughter. She had failed. But the experiment was over now. The elevator dinged. Elena stepped out onto the floor of the presidential suite and walked to room 847. She balanced the tray on one hand and knocked. Enter. The suite was enormous, all cream walls and gold accents and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Atlanta's glittering skyline. Lorraine was sitting on a velvet chaise phone pressed to her ear, barking orders at someone. Marcus was by the window adjusting his bow tie in the reflection. And Jasmine was draped across the sofa, sipping champagne and scrolling through her phone. Put it there. Lorraine didn't even look at Elena, just waved vaguely at the coffee table. And don't touch anything with your filthy hands. Elena set down the tray. Jasmine looked up, that cruel smile spreading across her face again. Oh, look, the maid came back. Did you wash your hands, sweetie? I don't want poor people germs on my glass. Jasmine. Marcus's voice was warning but weak. What? I'm just asking. Jasmine stood up, walking toward Elena with exaggerated slowness. You know, I've been thinking. You're actually quite pretty, in a sad way, like a stray cat that nobody wants. She reached out and touched Elena's hair, pulling a strand between her fingers. If you lost some weight and did something about your skin, you might actually find a man who wants you someday. After the divorce, I mean. Elena didn't move, didn't flinch. After the divorce? Oh, didn't Marcus tell you? Jasmine's eyes widened in mock surprise. We're getting married next spring. The lawyers are drawing up the papers. You'll be out of the house by Christmas. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. I'm going to redecorate your bedroom first. Get rid of all that pathetic taste you brought into the house. Something cracked inside Elena. Not her heart that had broken long ago. It was the lock on a cage she had kept shut for 3 very long years. She turned to Marcus. Is this true? Marcus finally looked at her. For 1 second, just 1 second, She thought she saw guilt in his eyes. Then it was gone, replaced by the cold indifference she had come to know so well. "Elena, this isn't how I wanted you to find out. Is it true?" "Yes." He straightened his cuffs. "The marriage isn't working. It hasn't been working for a long time. Jasmine's family is offering a significant investment, and the merger makes sense. You'll be taken care of. I'm not cruel. Not cruel." Elena laughed a sound that surprised even her. It was dark and hollow and wrong. "You've watched your mother degrade me for 3 years. You've let her turn me into a servant in my own home. You've been sleeping with another woman in our bed. And you think you're not cruel? This is exactly what I'm talking about." Marcus's jaw tightened. "You're emotional. You're irrational. You don't understand how business works, how families like ours operate. This is bigger than feelings, Elena. This is legacy." Lorraine hung up her phone and walked over her heels, clicking with finality. "I think we've been more than patient with you, girl. 3 years of feeding you clothing, giving you access to a world you had no business being part of. And what have you given us? Nothing but embarrassment." "I gave you everything I had," Elena whispered. "I gave you my love." "Love," Lorraine laughed. "Love doesn't pay bills. Love doesn't close deals. Love doesn't build empires." She stepped closer, her face twisting with contempt. "Do you know what you are? Elena? You're a mistake. A 3-year-old mistake that my son made when he was thinking with the wrong organ. But mistakes can be corrected." She turned to Jasmine. "Come, dear. Let's get you ready for the announcement. The photographers want pictures of you and Marcus together." "Wait." Elena's voice stopped them. It was different now. Lower, harder. The trembling was gone. Lorraine turned back, eyebrow raised. "What now?" "I want to ask Marcus one question." Elena's eyes locked onto her husband's. "One question, Marcus. That's all. Answer it honestly, and I'll sign whatever papers you want. I'll walk out of here tonight, and you'll never see me again." Marcus exchanged a glance with his mother, then shrugged. "Fine. What's your question?" Elena walked toward him slowly. Each step was measured, deliberate. She stopped 3 feet away, close enough to see the tiny scar on his chin from a childhood bicycle accident, the one he had told her about on their 3rd date. "In 3 years of marriage," she said softly, "did you ever even once wonder where my money came from?" Marcus frowned. "What?" "My money. The money I lived on before I met you. The money I used to fly to Seattle to rent an apartment to buy the clothes I wore to the coffee shop where we met." Elena tilted her head. "I was a barista, Marcus. I made minimum wage, but I lived alone in a 2-bedroom apartment in Capitol Hill. I wore designer shoes. I had a car. Did you ever wonder how... What does that have to do with anything? Everything." Elena smiled a slow, cold smile that didn't reach her eyes. "It has everything to do with everything." She reached into the pocket of her catering uniform and pulled out a small phone, not a smartphone, but an old burner battered and worn. "What is that?" Lorraine demanded. "Are you recording us? Give me that phone right now." Elena ignored her. She dialed a number she hadn't called in 195 days. It rang once. "Status." A voice answered, deep, commanding, dangerous. Not a question, a demand. "Dominic." Elena's voice shifted. The softness was gone. The submissiveness was gone. What replaced it was something regal, something steel-cold, something that made even Lorraine take an involuntary step back. Code Black. "The experiment is over. I'm at the Ritz-Carlton, Atlanta. Presidential suite. Room 847. There was a pause. Then the distinct sound of a gun being loaded. 20 minutes, ma'am. Should I bring the full team?" "Just yourself. And Dominic." "Yes, ma'am." "Bring the file on Washington properties. All of it." Her eyes never left Marcus's face. "I want their stock to hit 0 before dessert is served." She hung up. The silence in the room was absolute. Marcus was staring at her like he had never seen her before. Because he hadn't. None of them had. "What the hell was that?" Marcus demanded. "Who did you just call?" What file? You know, Marcus, I asked myself the same question for 3 years. Elena slipped the phone back into her pocket. Every night lying alone in that guest room, I asked myself why I was still here, why I was enduring your mother's insults and your affairs and your cowardice. You're insane. Lorraine's voice was shaking now. Security. Someone call security. Sit down, Mrs. Washington. Elena's voice cracked like a whip. Sit down and listen because I'm only going to say this once. Lorraine sat. She didn't know why, some instinct, some primal recognition of authority. But she sat. Elena walked to the window and looked out at the Atlanta skyline. When she spoke again, her voice was calm, almost gentle. 3 years ago my father died. He was a good man, a great man, and his last wish was that I find love. Not the kind of love that comes with contracts and mergers and family obligations. Real love. Pure love. She turned back to face them. So I gave up everything. My name, my identity, my fortune. I became Elena Hartwell barista, and I flew to America to find someone who would love me for who I am. What are you talking about? Marcus's voice was hoarse. What fortune? You worked at a coffee shop. I worked at a coffee shop because I chose to. Elena smiled again, that cold, terrifying smile. But before that, before I became Elena Hartwell, I was Genevieve Elena Hartwell III, sole heir to the Hartwell Global Banking Consortium, net worth approximately $4.2 billion. The number hung in the air like a guillotine blade. That's impossible, Jasmine whispered. Hartwell Global that's one of the biggest private equity firms in the world. Yes. Elena's eyes were ice. And for the last 3 years, that firm has been the silent partner keeping Washington Properties from total bankruptcy. Marcus's face went gray. What? Did you really think your father's company survived the 2021 market crash on its own? Did you really think those last-minute loans from unnamed European investors were just luck? Elena laughed softly. I paid your debts, Marcus. I covered your losses. I kept your family out of prison for securities fraud. I did it because I loved you. Her voice hardened. I wanted to see if you could love me back. This is insane. Lorraine stood up, her face a mask of denial. You're lying. This is some kind of trick. Call your accountant, Elena said calmly. Call your lawyers. Call whoever you need to call. They'll all tell you the same thing. Washington Properties has been operating on borrowed time and borrowed money for 3 years. My money. She checked her watch. But in about 18 minutes that money is going to disappear. And so is everything you've ever built. Marcus lunged toward her, grabbing her shoulders. You can't do this. You can't, Elena, please. I'll do anything. We can work this out. The divorce, I'll call it off. I'll send Jasmine away. We can start over. Elena looked at his hands on her shoulders, looked at his desperate, terrified face, looked at the man she had loved with every piece of her broken heart. Let go of me, Marcus. Please, just listen to me. Let go. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Or in 20 minutes, when that door opens, you will lose the hands. Marcus released her like she was made of fire. Elena straightened her catering uniform, smoothing out the wrinkles where he had grabbed her. She walked to the door, pausing with her hand on the handle. You had a diamond, Marcus, she said without turning around. You held it in your hands every single day for 3 years, but you treated it like broken glass. Now you have nothing but the cuts. She opened the door. Where are you going? Lorraine screamed. Get back here! I'm not finished with you! Elena turned, her silhouette framed in the doorway. But I'm finished with you, Mrs. Washington. Her voice was soft, almost sad. I'll see you in the ballroom. I have an announcement to make. The door closed behind her. She didn't go to the ballroom. She didn't go to the kitchen. She walked to the service elevator and pressed the button for the penthouse, the floor above the Washingtons, the floor that had been bought out entirely by a shell company called Aegis International Security. The doors opened, and there he stood. Dominic Steele filled the hallway like a force of nature. 6'4" of pure controlled violence, wearing a tuxedo that cost more than most people's houses. A scar ran through his left eyebrow, a permanent reminder of a war he never talked about. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, and right now they were scanning her for injury. "Status?" His voice was a low growl. "I'm fine." "You're bleeding." He was already moving toward her, his hand reaching for hers. "It's nothing." "The glass?" "It's not nothing." His jaw tightened as he examined the cut on her palm. "Did they do this to you?" "Dominic, did they touch you?" Elena looked up at him, at the man who had been her shadow for 3 years, watching from a distance, waiting for her call. At the man who had begged her not to do this, not to subject herself to this experiment, not to throw herself into a pit of vipers just to prove a dead man's point. He had been right. "The dress is ready," she asked, pulling her hand away gently. Dominic's eyes lingered on her for a moment longer. Then the professional mask slid back into place. "Yes, ma'am. And the dossier on Washington properties has been prepared. The financial journalists are on standby. One word from you, and it goes live." "Good." Elena walked past him into the penthouse suite, where a team of stylists and security personnel waited. "And Dominic?" "Yes, ma'am." She turned her eyes meeting his. "Stop calling me ma'am. Tonight, I stop being Elena Hartwell." She began unbuttoning the cheap catering uniform, revealing a diamond-encrusted camisole beneath. "Tonight, Genevieve comes home." Dominic watched her for a long moment. Then, slowly he nodded. "Yes, Genevieve." Behind them, through the penthouse windows, the lights of Atlanta sparkled like scattered diamonds. Below in the grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton, 300 guests were drinking champagne and celebrating a family that would be bankrupt within the hour. And somewhere in a presidential suite, a man named Marcus Washington was finally beginning to understand that the nobody he had married was about to burn his world to the ground. The transformation took exactly 17 minutes. Elena stood in front of the full-length mirror as the stylists worked around her like a Formula One pit crew. The catering uniform lay crumpled on the floor, a shed skin she would never wear again. In its place, they were dressing her in a gown of midnight blue silk, custom-made by Elie Saab himself, woven with threads of real platinum that caught the light like captured stars. "The necklace, ma'am." One of the stylists held out a velvet case. Elena opened it. Inside lay the heart of Vienna, a sapphire the size of a quail's egg, surrounded by diamonds that had once belonged to Austrian royalty. The last time this necklace had been seen in public was at a museum exhibition in Paris, behind 3 inches of bulletproof glass. She clasped it around her neck. The weight was familiar grounding. It reminded her of who she really was. "Genevieve." She turned. Dominic was standing in the doorway, his earpiece in his hand resting near the inside of his jacket, where she knew he kept his weapon. "The Washington family just made 17 phone calls in the last 4 minutes, he reported. Their lawyer, their accountant, 3 board members, the head of their PR firm. A ghost of a smile crossed his scarred face. "They're panicking." "Good. Elena, no." Genevieve now turned back to the mirror. "Let them panic. Let them feel what I felt for 3 years. The helplessness, the confusion, the ground disappearing beneath their feet. The financial data is ready to release. Say the word, and every major news outlet in the country will have proof of the Washington securities fraud by the time you reach the ballroom." Genevieve was quiet for a moment. Her reflection stared back at her, a stranger in royal clothes wearing the face of a woman who had scrubbed floors and endured slaps and swallowed her pride until it poisoned her from the inside. "Dominic." "Yes." "Do you think I waited too long?" Dominic walked toward her, his footsteps silent on the thick carpet. He stopped beside her, his reflection joining hers in the mirror. "I think," he said carefully, "that you gave them every chance to be decent human beings. You gave your husband 3 years to choose you. He chose money. He chose status. He chose a woman who calls you the help. His jaw tightened. You didn't wait too long, Genevieve. You waited exactly long enough to know without any doubt who they really are. She nodded slowly. Then let's show them who I really am. The grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton Atlanta was packed with 400 of the city's most powerful people. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across designer gowns and custom tuxedos. A string quartet played Vivaldi in the corner. Waiters circulated with silver trays of champagne and canapes. At the center of it all, the Washington family held court. Walter Washington, the patriarch, was a large man with silver hair and the confident posture of someone who had never been told no. He stood near the podium laughing loudly at something a senator had said, his hand wrapped around a tumbler of single malt scotch. Beside him, Lorraine had recovered her composure. Her face was a mask of practiced calm, though her eyes kept darting toward the ballroom entrance. She had changed into a fresh Chanel suit, emerald green this time, and was clutching her champagne glass like a lifeline. Marcus stood with Jasmine, their arms linked, posing for photographs. But even from across the room, anyone could see the tension in his shoulders, the tightness around his eyes. He kept checking his phone, waiting for news that would never come. Ladies and gentlemen, Walter's voice boomed across the ballroom as he stepped up to the podium. Thank you all for joining us tonight to celebrate 50 years of Washington Properties. Applause rippled through the crowd. When my father started this company in 1975, he had nothing but a dream and $100 in his pocket. Today, Washington Properties is worth over $500 million, with developments across the Southeast and partnerships that span the globe. More applause. Lorraine beamed. Marcus managed a stiff smile. And tonight, Walter continued, I am thrilled to announce a new chapter in our company's history. A merger that will combine the strength of Washington Properties with the vision of the Cole Family Trust, creating a real estate empire that will reshape the American South for generations to come. The applause was thunderous now. Jasmine stepped forward, waving like a beauty queen. Marcus raised his glass in a toast. To the future, Walter proclaimed. To family, to legacy, to... The lights went out. Not gradually, not with warning, just sudden, complete darkness. The string quartet stopped mid-note. Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. Then a single spotlight blazed to life, aimed at the grand staircase at the far end of the ballroom. A man appeared at the top of the stairs. He was enormous, 6'4", of pure muscle, wrapped in a tuxedo that probably cost more than most of the cars in the parking lot. His face was hard, angular, marked by a scar that ran through his left eyebrow. His eyes swept the room with the cold efficiency of a predator assessing prey. Dominic Steele didn't walk down the stairs. He descended like a force of nature, each step deliberate, each movement radiating controlled violence. The crowd parted before him instinctively, people stepping back without knowing why. He reached the bottom of the stairs and stopped. His voice, when he spoke, carried to every corner of the silent ballroom. Ladies and gentlemen, honored guests. His accent was unplaceable European, perhaps, but sharpened by years of service in places most people couldn't find on a map. Please welcome the guest of honor for this evening. Representing the Hartwell Global Banking Consortium, Miss Genevieve Elena Hartwell III. The double doors at the top of the staircase swung open, and she stepped out. The gasp that went through the crowd was audible. 400 people inhaling simultaneously, their champagne glasses frozen halfway to their lips. Genevieve descended the staircase like she had been born to it because she had. The midnight blue gown flowed behind her like liquid shadow. The heart of Vienna blazed at her throat, catching the spotlight and throwing rainbows across the walls. Her hair was no longer pulled back in a severe bun. It cascaded down her back in waves of golden silk. She didn't walk. She glided. Every step was a statement. Every movement was power made visible. At the Washington table, Lorraine's champagne glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. No one noticed. That's... Jasmine's voice was a strangled whisper. That's not possible. That's the waitress. That's the... Shut up. Marcus's voice was hollow. His face had gone gray, the color draining from his brown skin until he looked almost translucent. Just shut up. Genevieve reached the bottom of the stairs. Dominic fell into step 1 pace behind her, his hand resting casually near the inside of his jacket. Together they walked toward the Washington table. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Genevieve stopped 3 feet from Marcus. In her heels, she was nearly as tall as he was. She looked into his eyes, the eyes she had loved, the eyes she had searched for warmth in for 3 years, and found nothing but terror. "Good evening, Marcus." Her voice was amplified by the acoustics of the silent room, every word carried to every corner. "I believe you were looking for an investor." "Elena." The name came out as a croak. "What? What is this? Where did you get that dress? You stole it. You must have stolen it." "Her name," Dominic said, his voice a low growl that made people flinch, "is Miss Genevieve Elena Hartwell, and you will address her with respect." "Genevieve?" Marcus tried again, but the word felt foreign in his mouth. Wrong. "I don't understand. You were a barista. You worked at a coffee shop. I worked at a coffee shop because I chose to." Genevieve's voice was ice. "Because my father asked me on his deathbed to go into the world and find someone who would love me for who I am. Not for my name, not for my money, not for what I could give them." She tilted her head slightly. "I thought I found that in you, Marcus." "This is ridiculous." Lorraine had finally found her voice. She stepped forward, her face twisted with rage and denial. "This is some kind of con, some kind of elaborate scam. Security. Someone call security. This woman is an imposter." She reached for Genevieve's necklace to tear it off to prove it was fake to end this nightmare. She didn't make contact. Dominic's hand shot out and caught Lorraine's wrist in midair. The movement was so fast that most people didn't see it happen. One moment Lorraine was reaching the next, she was doubled over, gasping in pain as Dominic twisted her arm behind her back with surgical precision. "Do not," Dominic said, his voice barely above a whisper, but carrying through the entire room. "Touch Her Highness." "Let go of me," Lorraine shrieked. "Do you know who I am? I'll have you arrested. You'll do nothing." Dominic pressed slightly harder, and Lorraine let out a cry of pain. "You'll stand there quietly, and you'll listen to what Miss Hartwell has to say. And then, if you're very lucky, you'll spend the next 20 years in a minimum security prison instead of maximum." "Prison?" Walter Washington pushed forward, his face red with outrage. "What the hell are you talking about? Unhand my wife right now, or You'll what, Mr. Washington?" Genevieve's voice cut through his bluster like a knife. "Call your lawyers, the ones who have been hiding your securities fraud for the past 4 years. Or perhaps your accountant. The one who's been cooking your books to hide the fact that Washington Properties has been technically insolvent since 2021. The color drained from Walter's face. "How did you—" "I know everything, Mr. Washington." Genevieve signaled to Dominic, who released Lorraine with a slight shove that sent her stumbling backward into her husband. "I know about the falsified earnings reports. I know about the shell companies you used to inflate your stock price. I know about the bribes to the city council for those development permits in Buckhead." She reached out, and Dominic placed a sleek black tablet in her hand. "But most importantly," Genevieve continued, "I know that for the past 3 years, the only thing keeping your company from total collapse has been a series of anonymous loans from a European investment firm." She smiled a cold, terrifying smile. "My firm." "That's impossible." Walter's voice was shaking now. "Those loans were from Aegis Capital. We never knew who." Aegis Capital is a subsidiary of Hartwell Global, which means that every cent you've borrowed, every deal you've closed, every development you've built, has been built on my money. Genevieve looked around the room, addressing the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the dramatic interruption, but I felt you should know before any of you invest another dollar with Washington Properties exactly what you're investing in." She tapped the tablet screen. Immediately, phones began buzzing throughout the ballroom. The bankers and investors, dozens of them scattered among the guests, pulled out their devices, their faces going pale as they read the notifications flooding their screens. "What did you do?" Marcus grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into her flesh. "What did you just do?" Dominic moved, but Genevieve stopped him with a slight shake of her head. She looked down at Marcus's hand on her arm, the same hand that had grabbed her in the hotel suite, the same hand that had never reached for her with kindness or love. "I called in my loans, Marcus." Her voice was soft, almost gentle. "Every dollar I lent your company over the past 3 years is now due. Immediately. In full." We don't have that kind of liquidity. No one does. You'll destroy us." "Yes." Genevieve removed his hand from her arm finger by finger. "I will." My God. Someone in the crowd was reading from their phone, voice trembling. "Washington Properties stock just dropped 60%. 70. 80. It's in free fall." "No." Walter clutched his chest, his face going from red to gray. "No, no, no. This can't be happening. I'll sue. I'll sue you for everything you have." "With what, Mr. Washington?" Genevieve's voice was cold. "With the lawyers you can no longer afford, with the assets that are being frozen as we speak." She stepped closer to him. "You called me white trash. Your wife made me scrub your floors. Your son treated me like a disposable accessory. For 3 years I endured your cruelty because I loved your son, and I hoped foolishly, pathetically, hoped that he would someday love me back." She turned to Marcus, who was staring at her like he had never seen her before. "But you didn't love me, did you, Marcus? You loved what I could give you. The cooking, the cleaning, the silent acceptance of your affairs. The convenient wife who never complained, never demanded, never expected anything from you except the smallest crumb of affection." "Elena Genevieve, please." Marcus's voice cracked. Tears were forming in his eyes. "I didn't know. If I had known who you were..." "That's exactly the point." Genevieve's voice hardened. "If you had known who I was, you would have treated me like a princess, but because you thought I was nobody, you treated me like garbage." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried through the entire room. "That's who you really are, Marcus. Not the charming man I met in the coffee shop, not the misunderstood heir looking for true love. You're just a weak, greedy little boy who only values people for what they can give you. Please." Marcus fell to his knees, actually fell right there on the ballroom floor in front of 400 witnesses. "Please don't do this. I'll change. I'll be different. We can start over. I'll send Jasmine away. You'll love me." Genevieve shook her head slowly. "You had 3 years to love me, Marcus. 3 years to stand up to your mother. 3 years to choose me over your affairs and your money and your pathetic need for approval. And every single day you chose everything else." She turned away from him. "Genevieve." Marcus grabbed the hem of her gown, clutching it like a drowning man clutching a life preserver. "Please, I'm begging you." Dominic started forward, but Genevieve raised her hand. She looked down at her husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, kneeling on the floor of the ballroom, where she had been forced to serve champagne not 2 hours ago. "Let go, Marcus." I can't lose everything. Please, I'll do anything." "Then let go." Her voice was soft, almost sad. "Let go, and maybe I'll tell the prosecutors that you cooperated. Maybe you'll get 15 years instead of 25. Marcus's fingers uncurled. He slumped on the floor, his designer tuxedo crumpling, his perfectly gelled hair falling into his eyes. He looked in that moment exactly like what he was, a broken man who had gambled everything on the wrong hand. Genevieve stepped over him. "Ladies and gentlemen," she addressed the crowd, "I apologize again for the disruption to your evening. Please continue enjoying the party. The champagne is already paid for courtesy of Washington Properties' operational budget, which I will be seizing as collateral within the hour." She walked toward the exit. Dominic fell into step beside her, his eyes scanning the room for threats. But before she could reach the doors, a voice rang out behind her. "You think you've won?" Genevieve turned. Jasmine Cole was standing near the Washington table, her red Versace gown looking suddenly garish against the backdrop of devastation. Her face was twisted with rage and humiliation. "You think just because you have money you're better than us?" Jasmine stalked toward her, her heels clicking against the marble. "You're still the same pathetic woman who was serving champagne an hour ago. You're still the woman Marcus threw away like garbage. Money doesn't change that. Money doesn't make you worth anything." "Jasmine." Marcus's voice was weak from the floor. "Don't." "No!" Jasmine spun on him. "You're worthless. Your whole family is worthless. I was going to marry into a dynasty and instead I got a house of cards." She turned back to Genevieve, her eyes blazing. "At least I know who I am. At least I don't have to pretend to be a nobody to find someone who likes me." Genevieve regarded her calmly. "Are you finished?" "I'm just getting started." Jasmine stepped closer. "You think you're so smart, you think you've thought of everything my family has connections to. My father knows people who... Your father's real estate holdings are leveraged with Washington Properties bonds." Genevieve's voice was matter-of-fact. "As of 30 seconds ago, those bonds are worthless. Your family's portfolio just lost approximately 80% of its value." Jasmine's face went white. "What?" "I suggest you call him." Genevieve glanced at Dominic. "We're done here." She turned and walked toward the exit. "You can't just..." Jasmine started after her, but a waiter, one of the actual waiters, not Genevieve in disguise, stepped into her path, and by the time she pushed past him, Genevieve was already gone. The ballroom erupted into chaos. Phones were ringing, people were shouting, lawyers were being called. Walter Washington had collapsed into a chair, his hand still pressed to his chest. Lorraine was screaming at anyone who would listen that this was all a misunderstanding, that they would sue, that they would destroy that woman if it was the last thing they did. Marcus stayed on the floor. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just stared at the doors through which his wife, his ex-wife, he now realized had disappeared. For 3 years he had held a diamond in his hands, and he had treated it like broken glass. Outside the ballroom in the private corridor that led to the service elevators, Genevieve finally allowed herself to stop. She leaned against the wall, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. "Genevieve?" Dominic was beside her instantly. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine." But her voice was shaking. "I'm fine. I just need a moment." "You did well. Better than well. You were magnificent." She laughed a broken sound that was half sob, half genuine amusement. "I destroyed a family tonight, Dominic. I took everything they had." "They destroyed themselves." Dominic's voice was firm. "You simply stopped protecting them from the consequences of their own actions." "Did I?" She looked up at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Or did I just prove that I'm exactly what Lorraine always said I was: vindictive, cruel, willing to burn everything down just to prove a point?" Dominic was quiet for a moment. Then he reached out and gently wiped a tear from her cheek. "You know what I saw tonight," he said softly. "I saw a woman who spent 3 years being abused, humiliated, and degraded. A woman who could have destroyed her tormentors at any moment, but chose not to, because she was still hoping, still believing that love could conquer cruelty." He shook his head slowly. "That's not vindictive, Genevieve. That's not cruel. That's someone who gave them every possible chance to be decent human beings, and when they proved they couldn't be, finally decided to stop letting them hurt her. But the money was yours to do with as you pleased. You invested it in their company. You have every right to withdraw it." His jaw tightened. "What they did with the money, the fraud, the bribes, the illegal dealings, that was their choice, their crime. You didn't make them criminals, Genevieve. You just stopped hiding their crimes for them." She was quiet for a long moment. Then slowly she nodded. "Thank you, Dominic." "For what?" "For being here. For waiting 3 years while I made a fool of myself." She managed a small smile. For not saying, "I told you so." I would never. But there was a hint of warmth in his voice, a softening of his perpetually stern features. Although I did tell you so. She laughed a real laugh this time, though still tinged with exhaustion. Take me home, Dominic. I've had enough of Atlanta for one lifetime. The jet is ready, but... He hesitated. There's something you should know first. The warmth in Genevieve's chest turned cold. She knew that tone. It was Dominic's bad news tone, the one he used when he had to tell her something she didn't want to hear. What is it? The financial analysts finished their review of Washington Properties records while you were in the ballroom. Dominic pulled out his phone, scrolling through a secure message. The fraud was more extensive than we initially believed. They weren't just cooking their books, they were laundering money. Laundering money for whom? Dominic was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. Harder, darker. Do you remember 3 years ago when we first started investigating the Washington family's finances, there was a series of shell companies we couldn't trace. Anonymous investors funneling money through offshore accounts in Singapore and the Cayman Islands. I remember, we assumed it was tax evasion. It wasn't. Dominic turned the phone toward her. On the screen was a complex web of financial transactions shell companies nested inside shell companies like Russian dolls made of dirty money. We finally traced the source. The Washingtons weren't just committing fraud, Genevieve. They were the front for something much bigger. What? Dominic zoomed in on a logo that appeared repeatedly in the deepest layers of the financial web. A stylized S intertwined with a serpent. The Serpent Syndicate, he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. Eastern European organized crime, arms trafficking, human smuggling, financial terrorism. They don't sue their enemies, Genevieve. They don't file lawsuits or make threats. His eyes met hers. They eliminate problems. Genevieve stared at the screen. The cold in her chest spread outward, seeping into her limbs. How much money did I just cost them? Based on our estimates. Dominic's jaw tightened. Approximately $470 million. My God. It gets worse. Dominic hesitated again, and Genevieve felt her heart clench. In all the years she had known him, Dominic had never hesitated this much. There's something else you need to know. Something about me. About you. My real name isn't Dominic Steele. He looked away, unable to meet her eyes. It's Dominic Sokolov. My father is Viktor Sokolov. He's the head of the Serpent Syndicate. The words hung in the air between them. Genevieve felt the world tilt slightly, like the floor had suddenly shifted beneath her feet. What? I left when I was 18. I changed my name, joined the French Foreign Legion, built a new life. Your father hired me because he knew. He knew that the only person who could protect you from the wolves of this world was someone who had been raised by them. You've been lying to me for 3 years. I've been protecting you for 3 years. Dominic finally looked at her, and she saw something in his eyes she had never seen before. Pain, guilt, fear. My father is a monster, Genevieve. He trained me to be a monster too. I ran away because I couldn't become what he wanted me to be. His voice dropped. But he never stopped looking for me, and now he knows where you are. He saw the footage from the ballroom. It's already viral. A dozen news outlets are running the story of the billionaire heiress who destroyed her in-laws. Dominic's hand clenched at his side. He knows his son is protecting the woman who just cost him $500 million. Genevieve was quiet for a long moment. She thought about the ballroom, about Marcus on his knees, about Lorraine screaming and Walter's ashen face and Jasmine's impotent rage. She had wanted justice. She had wanted closure. She had wanted to finally, after 3 years, stop being invisible. She had gotten all of that, but in doing so, she had painted a target on her back that she hadn't even known existed. What do we do? She asked. Dominic looked at her. His eyes were hard again, the vulnerability of a moment ago, locked away behind years of training and discipline. We get you somewhere safe. The Hartwell estate in Vienna has the best security in Europe. We can... No. Dominic blinked. No. I'm not running, Dominic. Genevieve straightened, squaring her shoulders. I spent 3 years hiding who I was. 3 years pretending to be someone small and weak and invisible. I'm done hiding. This isn't like the Washingtons. These people don't make legal threats or social embarrassments. They kill Genevieve. They torture. Then we fight back. Dominic stared at her. You want to go to war with an international crime syndicate? They came for my money. They used my husband's family as a front for their operations. They made me complicit in their crimes without my knowledge. Genevieve's voice hardened. And when they find out what happened tonight, they're going to come for me anyway. Whether I run or whether I fight, they're coming. Genevieve. You know their operations, Dominic. You know their weaknesses. You know where their money is and how they move it. She stepped closer to him. Help me. Help me take them down. If I do this, if we do this, there's no going back. My father will use everything he has to destroy us. He'll come after you, after your company, after everyone you love. Dominic's voice was raw. I can't guarantee I can protect you from that. Then don't guarantee it. Genevieve reached out and took his hand. It was warm, despite the cold corridor calloused from years of weapons training and combat. Just promise me you'll try. Dominic looked down at her hand in his. At the blood that had dried on her palm from the broken glass, the wound she had never bothered to bandage. At the diamond ring on her finger, Marcus's ring, the one that had meant nothing from the start. I promise, he said quietly. Until my last breath. Genevieve nodded. She slipped the engagement ring off her finger and let it fall to the floor. It clinked against the marble, a tiny sound that echoed in the empty corridor. Then let's go to Vienna, she said. We have a war to plan. They walked toward the service elevator, leaving the ring where it lay. Behind them, the muffled sounds of chaos still filtered through the ballroom doors, lawyers threatening, phones ringing, an empire crumbling in real time. But Genevieve didn't look back. She had spent 3 years looking back. 3 years, hoping that if she was patient enough, good enough, invisible enough, the people she loved would finally see her. They never did. But now she realized that didn't matter anymore. She didn't need them to see her. She didn't need Marcus's love or Lorraine's approval, or any of the things she had spent 3 years desperately craving. She had something better now. She had herself, and she had a man willing to go to war beside her. The elevator doors opened. Genevieve stepped inside Dominic at her shoulder. As the doors began to close, she caught one last glimpse of the corridor, the fallen engagement ring glinting on the marble floor, the distant sounds of the Washington family's destruction echoing through the walls. Then the doors closed, and Elena Hartwell disappeared forever. In her place stood Genevieve Elena Hartwell, the third billionaire heiress, and now the woman who had just declared war on one of the most dangerous criminal organizations in the world. The elevator began to rise. Outside, the first police cars were arriving at the Ritz-Carlton, their lights painting the night in red and blue. News vans were pulling up, reporters scrambling to cover the story of the century. Social media was exploding with videos from the ballroom. The mysterious woman in the sapphire necklace, the man who had brought Lorraine Washington to her knees, the heir who had lost everything in a single night. But none of them knew the real story. None of them knew that the true war hadn't even begun. 15,000 miles away, in a castle perched on a cliff in the Carpathian Mountains, a man named Viktor Sokolov watched the footage from Atlanta on a screen the size of a wall. His face was impassive, carved from the same stone as the fortress around him, but his eyes, gray like his son's, burned with cold fury. "Find them," he said to the men standing behind him. "Find them both, and bring me the woman alive." He paused, his hand tightening around the glass of vodka he held. "As for my son," Viktor Sokolov smiled a smile that had made generals and presidents tremble. "Bring me his head." The hunt had begun. The Hartwell estate sat on a cliff overlooking the Austrian Alps, a fortress of white stone and centuries of history. It had survived 2 world wars, a dozen attempted break-ins, and 3 generations of Hartwells who valued their privacy above almost everything else. But it had never faced anything like this. Genevieve stood at the window of her father's study, her study now watching the sun rise over the mountains. She hadn't slept in 36 hours. The flight from Atlanta had been tense, every turbulence bump making Dominic's hand move toward his weapon. They had landed in Vienna at 3 a.m. local time, and by 4 a.m., the estate's security systems had detected the first probe. Someone was testing their defenses. The perimeter sensors picked up movement in the eastern woods at Yo 347. Dominic's voice came from behind her. He was studying a bank of security monitors, his face illuminated by the blue glow of the screens. 2 men, professional-grade equipment. They retreated when the motion lights activated. Scouts. Reconnaissance. They're mapping our defenses looking for weak points. He straightened, running a hand through his dark hair. My father always sends scouts first. He'll know the layout of this estate within 48 hours. Genevieve turned from the window. Then we have 48 hours to prepare. Prepare for what exactly? Dominic's voice was tight. The Serpent Syndicate has over 2,000 soldiers across Eastern Europe. My father has connections with governments, with intelligence agencies, with people who make problems disappear. We have a security team of 34. We have more than that. Dominic raised an eyebrow. Such as information. Genevieve walked to her father's desk, a massive oak piece that had belonged to her great-grandfather, and opened a drawer. Inside was a leather-bound folder, thick with documents. Before my father died, he gave me this. He said it was insurance in case I ever needed leverage against powerful enemies. What is it? Genevieve placed the folder on the desk. Everything. Bank account numbers, transaction records, names of politicians and law enforcement officials on the syndicate's payroll, shipping routes for their arms deals, safe house locations across Europe. She looked up at Dominic. My father spent 20 years gathering this information. He never used it because he never needed to, but he knew someday I might. Dominic opened the folder. His eyes scanned the first page, then the second, then the third. With each page, his expression shifted from skepticism to surprise to something approaching awe. This is enough to bring down a dozen governments. It's enough to bring down my father-in-law's organization, your father's organization. Genevieve's voice hardened. If we release this to the right people, Interpol, the FBI, the Austrian Federal Police, Viktor Sokolov will spend the rest of his life in a prison cell. If we live long enough to release it. Dominic closed the folder. The moment my father realizes we have this, he'll stop sending scouts. He'll send an army. Then we need to move first. Genevieve walked to the window again, her reflection ghosting over the glass. You said you know his operations, his weaknesses. Tell me. Dominic was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, older, heavier, weighted with memories he had spent years trying to bury. My father's power comes from 3 things: money, fear, and loyalty. Take away any one of them, and the others collapse. Which is the weakest? Money. Dominic joined her at the window, standing close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. The syndicate's soldiers aren't loyal to my father. They're loyal to his payroll. If the money stops flowing, they'll abandon him within a week. Then we target the money. It's not that simple. The syndicate's finances are spread across hundreds of accounts in dozens of countries. Legitimate businesses mixed with shell companies mixed with cryptocurrency. Even with your father's files, it would take months to unravel it all. We don't have months. I know. Dominic turned to face her. In the pale morning light, his scar stood out starkly against his skin, a permanent reminder of the violence he had escaped. There's another way, faster but more dangerous. Tell me. Tomorrow night my father is hosting a summit at his castle in the Carpathian Mountains. Every major player in the syndicate will be there. Arms dealers, money launderers, corrupt officials. It's an annual event, a chance for him to remind everyone who holds the power. And during that summit, all of the syndicate's financial records are consolidated in one place. A secure server in the castle's basement, accessible only during the meeting. Dominic's jaw tightened. If we could get to that server, we could freeze every account the syndicate has. Simultaneously, globally, in less than 10 seconds. Genevieve felt her heart rate accelerate. You're talking about infiltrating your father's castle during a summit of his most dangerous criminals in Europe. Yes. With 34 security personnel against 2,000 soldiers. 35. Dominic's eyes met hers. I'll be going with you. You? Genevieve shook her head. Dominic, if your father captures you, he won't capture me. There was something cold in Dominic's voice now, something that reminded her that beneath the professional bodyguard was a man who had been trained from childhood to be a killer. If we're going to end this, it has to be there. It has to be tomorrow night. Any other approach gives him time to hunt us down, to hurt the people around us, to turn our lives into a living hell. And if we fail, then we die. Dominic's voice was flat, matter-of-fact. But at least we die fighting, instead of hiding in a fortress, waiting for the wolves to find a way in. Genevieve was quiet. She thought about Marcus kneeling on the ballroom floor begging her for mercy. She thought about Lorraine screaming that she was white trash and nobody a mistake. She thought about 3 years of humiliation and silence, and hoping that someday, somehow things would get better. They never got better on their own. You had to make them better. You had to fight. Okay, she said finally. Tell me the plan. Dominic nodded slowly. There was something in his eyes, respect maybe, or something deeper that hadn't been there before. First, we need to get inside the castle without being detected. I know the security protocols. I designed half of them before I left. There's a service entrance on the eastern wall that's only used for deliveries. We can... The explosion rocked the entire estate. Genevieve was thrown sideways, crashing against the desk as the windows behind her shattered inward. Glass rained down around her, cutting her arms, her face, her hands. The world became a chaos of smoke and noise and screaming alarms. Genevieve! Dominic was beside her in an instant, shielding her body with his own. Are you hurt? Can you move? I'm fine. She wasn't fine. Her ears were ringing, and blood was dripping from a cut on her forehead. But she could move, and right now that was all that mattered. What happened? Car bomb. The north gate. Dominic was already pulling her toward the door, his weapon drawn. They weren't scouting. They were distracting us. Another explosion closer this time. The floor shook beneath their feet. The panic room. Dominic's voice was urgent. Underground sealed independent air supply. You'll be safe there until... No. Genevieve pulled her arm from his grip. I'm not hiding in a hole while my people are being attacked. This isn't a negotiation, Genevieve. My father's men are breaching the perimeter right now. If they find you, then I'll fight them. She grabbed a handgun from the weapons cabinet her father had kept hidden in the study's wall paneling. It was a Glock 19, the same model Dominic had trained her to use during those late-night sessions she had pretended were just for exercise. I'm done being the woman who hides Dominic. I'm done being the victim. Dominic stared at her for a long moment. The alarms were screaming. The smell of smoke was filling the corridor, and somewhere outside, gunfire had begun to crack through the morning air. Stay behind me, he said finally. And if I tell you to run, you run. No arguments. No arguments. They moved through the corridor together, Dominic leading with his weapon raised. The estate was chaos, security personnel running toward the breach, servants fleeing toward the safe rooms, the constant pop-pop-pop of gunfire getting closer. How many? Genevieve asked as they rounded a corner. Based on the explosions, at least 30, maybe more. Dominic's voice was calm, professional, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. They came prepared. This isn't a raid, it's an invasion. They reached the main staircase. Below, through the shattered front windows, Genevieve could see the north gate, or what was left of it. The massive iron structure had been blown inward, twisted metal scattered across the courtyard. Through the gap, black-clad figures were pouring in, their weapons raised. The server room. Dominic grabbed her arm, pulling her back from the staircase. In the basement. Your father's files we need to— No! Genevieve's voice was hard. The files can be replaced. My people can't. We need to get them to safety. Genevieve. That's an order, Dominic. He looked at her, really looked at her with those storm-gray eyes that had seen so much violence, so much death. And then slowly, he nodded. The servants' quarters. East Wing. It's the most defensible position. They moved through the estate like ghosts avoiding the main corridors where the fighting was heaviest. Twice they encountered syndicate soldiers, and twice Dominic dispatched them with brutal efficiency, 2 shots center mass, before they could even raise their weapons. Genevieve tried not to look at the bodies. They reached the servants' quarters to find a dozen staff members huddled in the common room, their faces pale with terror. The head housekeeper, a woman named Marta who had worked for the Hartwell family for 30 years, rushed toward them. Miss Genevieve! Thank God! We heard the explosions and then the gunfire and— It's okay, Marta. Genevieve's voice was steady, even though her hands were shaking. We're going to get you out of here. All of you. There's a tunnel beneath the wine cellar that leads to the village. Do you remember? Yes, miss. Your father showed me years ago. Good. Take everyone and go. Don't stop until you reach the village, and then call this number. She pressed a card into Marta's hand, the private line for Hartwell Global's head of security. Tell them what happened. They'll know what to do. But miss, what about you? I'll be right behind you. It was a lie, and they both knew it. But Marta nodded anyway, gathering the staff and ushering them toward the cellar door. Dominic waited until they were gone before speaking. That was the right call. It was the only call. Genevieve checked her weapon, 14 rounds plus 1 in the chamber. How do we get out? We don't. Dominic moved to the window, peering through a crack in the shutters. They've surrounded the estate. Every exit is covered. Then we fight our way through. Against 30 soldiers, with 2 weapons and limited ammunition. He shook his head. We need another option. What about the helipad? Destroyed in the first explosion, they knew exactly what they were doing. Dominic's voice was grim. This was planned, Genevieve. Every detail. They've been watching us longer than we thought. Genevieve felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. Your father. Who else he knew we would come here? Knew the estate's defenses. Knew— Dominic stopped, his body going rigid. Someone's coming. They pressed against the wall, weapons raised as footsteps approached the servants' quarters. Heavy, deliberate, making no attempt at stealth. The door opened. A man walked in, tall, broad-shouldered, with silver hair and the weathered face of someone who had seen violence up close. He was wearing tactical gear, a rifle slung across his back, but his hands were empty, raised in a gesture of surrender. Don't shoot, he said in accented English. I'm not here to fight. Dominic's weapon didn't waver. Who are you? My name is Alexei. I served your father for 20 years. The man's eyes moved from Dominic to Genevieve and back again. But I'm not here for him. I'm here for you. Why should we believe that? Because I'm the one who tipped off the Austrian authorities about the convoy carrying your father's weapons through Vienna last month. Alexei's voice was flat, emotionless. And because I'm the one who sent the warning to your mother before she fled to Switzerland 6 years ago. Dominic's face went pale. My mother. She's alive, Dominic. Living under a false name in Geneva. Your father thinks she's dead. I made sure of that. Alexei lowered his hands slowly. I've been waiting for someone to challenge Viktor Sokolov for years. When I saw the footage from Atlanta, I knew the time had finally come. How do we know this isn't a trap? You don't. Alexei shrugged. But if I wanted you dead, you'd be dead already. There are 37 syndicate soldiers outside this building right now. I told them to secure the perimeter while I searched the interior. They'll be expecting me back in 10 minutes. What do you want? Genevieve spoke for the first time, her voice steady despite the gun trembling slightly in her hands. Alexei looked at her. Really looked the way Dominic sometimes did, like he was seeing something beneath the surface. I want what you want, Miss Hartwell, to destroy the syndicate, to bring Viktor Sokolov to justice. He paused. And I can help you do it, but not here, not tonight. We already have a plan, Dominic said. The summit tomorrow. Won't happen if you're dead. Alexei cut him off. Viktor knows about your father's files, Miss Hartwell. He knows you have enough information to destroy him. That's why he sent an army instead of assassins. He wants those files, and he wants them now. Then we destroy them. No. Alexei shook his head. The files are your only leverage. Without them, you're just two more bodies for Viktor to bury. He glanced at the window. I have a vehicle waiting outside the east wall. My men are loyal to me, not to Viktor. I can get you out, both of you, but we have to move now. Genevieve looked at Dominic. His face was unreadable, his weapon still trained on Alexei's chest. How do you know my mother is alive? Dominic's voice was barely above a whisper. Because I helped her escape. Alexei met his gaze without flinching. Your father beat her within an inch of her life when she tried to leave with you. I found her in the wine cellar, bleeding, barely conscious. I smuggled her out of the castle in a delivery truck and drove her to the Swiss border myself. His voice softened. She wanted to take you with her, Dominic, but you were only 14. Viktor had guards on you around the clock. There was no way to get you both out. She abandoned me. She saved herself so that someday she could help save you. Alexei's eyes were steady. She's been watching you, Dominic. All these years. Watching you grow. Watching you escape. Watching you become the man your father never wanted you to be. He paused. She's proud of you. Something shifted in Dominic's face. The hard professional mask cracked just for a moment, revealing the boy who had been left behind in a monster's castle all those years ago. We go with him, Dominic said, finally lowering his weapon. But if this is a trap, I'll die right alongside you. Alexei was already moving toward the door. Now come. We have 3 minutes before my absence is noticed. They moved through the estate like shadows, Alexei leading them through servant passages and hidden corridors that Genevieve hadn't even known existed. The sounds of fighting grew fainter as they descended into the basement, through the wine cellar, and into a tunnel that ran beneath the eastern wall. This was your father's escape route, Alexei explained as they hurried through the darkness. Built during the Cold War, in case the Soviets ever invaded. Viktor knows about it, but he thinks it was sealed years ago. Was it? I unsealed it 3 days ago. Alexei's flashlight cut through the blackness. I've been planning this for months, Miss Hartwell, waiting for the right moment, the right opportunity. Why, what does Viktor's downfall mean to you? Alexei was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with old pain. I had a daughter once. Beautiful girl. Smart, kind, full of life. She wanted to be a doctor. He paused. When she was 17, she fell in love with the wrong boy, a boy who owed money to the syndicate. When he couldn't pay, Viktor took her instead, as collateral. My God. I never saw her again. Alexei's voice hardened. Viktor told me she was shipped to a buyer in Dubai, that she was probably dead within a year. He told me this while pouring me a glass of vodka like it was nothing. Like my daughter's life meant nothing. They emerged from the tunnel into a dense forest, the morning light filtering through the trees. A black SUV was waiting, engine running, driver invisible behind tinted windows. Get in, Alexei said, opening the rear door. We have a safe house in Vienna. You can regroup there, plan your next move. Genevieve hesitated. What about the estate, my staff? Your staff escaped through the tunnel before we did. They're already in the village contacting your security team. Alexei's voice softened. Your people are safe, Miss Hartwell. You saved them. Dominic put his hand on the small of her back, guiding her toward the vehicle. We need to go, Genevieve. Every second we stay here is another second my father has to find us. She nodded, climbing into the SUV. Dominic followed, then Alexei. The doors slammed shut, and the vehicle accelerated into the forest. Through the rear window, Genevieve watched the Hartwell estate grow smaller, smoke still rising from the damaged buildings. The place where she had grown up, where her father had died, where she had thought she would always be safe. Gone now. All of it. Because of her. Stop. Dominic's voice was firm. Whatever you're thinking right now, stop. I brought this on them. On everyone. Viktor Sokolov brought this on them. The Washingtons brought this on them. You were just trying to live your life. Dominic's hand found hers in the darkness of the vehicle. His grip was warm, steady. This isn't your fault, Genevieve. Then whose fault is it? The people who chose cruelty over kindness, greed over love, power over humanity. His thumb traced circles on her palm. You didn't create the monsters, Genevieve. You just stopped hiding from them. She looked at him, at this man who had been raised by wolves and somehow retained his humanity, who had spent 3 years protecting her without ever asking for anything in return. Why? She whispered. Why what? Why have you stayed all these years? You could have walked away a dozen times. You could have gone anywhere, been anyone. Why did you stay with me? Dominic was quiet for a long moment. The SUV bounced over a rough patch of road, throwing them together in the darkness. Because, he said finally, the first time I saw you, you were crying. What? In your father's study, 6 years ago. I had just been hired, and I was meeting the family for the first time. You came in from the garden, and you didn't see me standing in the corner. You sat in your father's chair, and you cried. I don't remember that. You wouldn't. You were grieving. Your mother had just passed. Dominic's voice was soft. But I watched you cry, and then I watched you dry your tears, stand up, and walk out like nothing had happened. Like you hadn't just been falling apart. And I thought, what? I thought this is the strongest person I have ever seen, and if she ever needs protecting, I want to be the one to do it. Genevieve felt tears prick at her eyes. She blinked them away, but one escaped, tracing a path down her cheek. Dominic reached out and gently wiped it away, the same gesture he had made in the corridor outside the ballroom a lifetime ago. We're going to survive this, he said quietly. We're going to destroy Viktor Sokolov, and we're going to build something better on the ashes of his empire. Together. You sound very certain. I am certain. His eyes met hers in the darkness. Because I've spent 6 years watching you face impossible situations and come out stronger every time. Because I know what you're capable of, even when you don't know it yourself. He paused. And because I love you, Genevieve. I have loved you since the moment I saw you crying in your father's chair, and I will love you until the day I die. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Genevieve felt something crack inside her chest, not breaking this time, but opening, like a flower that had been frozen for years, finally feeling the warmth of the sun. Dominic, she whispered. The SUV's tires screeched as the driver slammed on the brakes. Genevieve was thrown forward, catching herself against the seat in front of her. What's happening? Dominic's weapon was already in his hand, his body coiled for action. Roadblock, Alexei reported from the front seat. 3 vehicles. Syndicate. How did they find us? I don't know. Alexei's voice was grim. But we're not getting through. Not without a fight. Genevieve looked out the window. 3 black SUVs were blocking the road ahead, armed men already pouring out and taking positions. Behind them, more vehicles were approaching, cutting off their escape. They were trapped. How many rounds do you have? Dominic asked. 15, plus a spare magazine. That's not enough. I know. Alexei turned around in his seat, his face set in grim determination. There's a path through the woods. On foot we might be able to... The first bullet shattered the windshield. The driver slumped forward, dead before he could react. The SUV lurched as his foot left the accelerator, rolling to a stop in the middle of the road. "Out now!" Dominic threw open the door, dragging Genevieve with him. Bullets tore through the air around them as they dove into the underbrush, Alexei right behind. "This way." Alexei led them deeper into the forest, moving with the practiced efficiency of a man who had spent decades navigating war zones. "There's a river half a mile east. If we can reach it, we won't reach it." Dominic grabbed Genevieve's arm, pulling her behind a massive oak tree. "Listen." She heard it, the bark of dogs, the shouts of men, the methodical crunch of footsteps through underbrush. They were being hunted. "How many?" she asked. 20, maybe more." Dominic checked his weapon. "They're pushing us toward the river. It's a trap." "Then we spring it." Both men looked at her. "We spring it," she repeated. "We let them think they've cornered us, and then—" "And then what?" Alexei's voice was skeptical. "We're outnumbered 10-1. We're outnumbered, but we're not outmatched." Genevieve's mind was racing, adrenaline sharpening her thoughts to a razor edge. "Dominic, you said your father's power comes from money, fear, and loyalty. We can't touch his money right now, and we can't shake his soldiers' loyalty. But fear? Fear we can use." Dominic's eyes lit with understanding. "If we can take out their leader, they'll scatter. Professional soldiers follow orders, but mercenaries follow paychecks. If the man giving orders is dead, they'll cut their losses and run. It's a gamble. Everything is a gamble now." Genevieve gripped her weapon tighter. "But I'd rather gamble on us than on running." The footsteps were getting closer. Through the trees, she could see flashlight beams cutting through the morning mist. Dominic looked at Alexei. "Can you identify the commander?" "Big man, scar on his neck. He'll be in the back directing operations." "Then that's our target." Dominic turned to Genevieve. "When I give the signal, you run for the river. Don't look back. Don't stop. I'm not leaving you. You're not leaving me. You're getting to safety so we can finish what we started." His hand cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. "I'll find you, Genevieve. I promise. But right now, I need you to trust me." She looked into his eyes. Those storm-gray eyes that had watched over her for 6 years, that had seen her at her weakest, and still believed she was strong. "I trust you," she said. "But if you die, then you burn them all." His voice was fierce. "You take that folder, and you destroy Viktor Sokolov and everyone who ever worked for him. You don't stop until there's nothing left but ashes." "Dominic." He kissed her. It wasn't gentle, it wasn't romantic. It was desperate and fierce and full of everything they had never said to each other. Every word that had been locked away for 6 years, finally breaking free. When he pulled back, his eyes were blazing. "Now run!" He pushed her toward the river and disappeared into the forest, Alexei right behind him. Seconds later, gunfire erupted, sharp, controlled bursts that she recognized as Dominic's weapon. Genevieve ran. Branches whipped at her face, roots tried to trip her feet, but she kept running. Behind her, the sounds of battle grew fainter. Shouts. Gunfire, the bark of confused dogs. She didn't look back. She couldn't look back. She reached the river just as the sun broke fully over the horizon, painting the water gold. For a moment she stood there gasping for breath, her heart pounding in her chest. Then she heard it, a single gunshot, louder than the others. Final. "Dominic?" she whispered. She waited. 1 minute, 2, 3. The forest had gone silent. Genevieve closed her eyes. She thought about Marcus on his knees in the ballroom. She thought about Lorraine screaming that she was nothing. She thought about 3 years of humiliation, of silence, of hoping for love that never came. And she thought about Dominic. His hands on her face, his lips on hers, his voice fierce and full of faith. "You burn them all." When she opened her eyes, they were dry. She turned and began walking along the riverbank, heading east toward Vienna. The folder was still in her jacket, pressed against her heart like a loaded weapon. She had a war to win, and God help anyone who stood in her way. Genevieve walked for 7 hours. She didn't stop when her feet began to blister. She didn't stop when hunger clawed at her stomach or when exhaustion made her vision blur. She kept moving one foot in front of the other because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering that single gunshot echoing through the forest. By the time she reached the outskirts of Vienna, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that looked too much like blood. She found a payphone, one of the last in the city, and dialed a number she had memorized years ago but never thought she would use. It rang twice. Hartwell Global Security, state your authorization code. Delta 79 Alpha. Her voice was hoarse, barely recognizable. This is Genevieve Hartwell. I need extraction. There was a pause. Then, Miss Hartwell, we've been trying to reach you for hours. The estate? I know about the estate. I need a secure location in Vienna, somewhere off the grid. Can you do that? Yes, ma'am. There's a safe house in the 3rd district. I'm sending the address to your secondary phone now. My phone was destroyed in the attack. Another pause. Then I'll send a car. Stay where you are. 20 minutes. Make it 15. She hung up and leaned against the phone booth, her legs finally giving out. The folder was still pressed against her chest, the edges digging into her ribs. The only thing that mattered now, the only weapon she had left. Dominic's face flashed through her mind, his eyes in the darkness of the SUV. His voice. I love you, Genevieve. I have loved you since the moment I saw you crying in your father's chair. She pressed her hand against her mouth, stifling the sob that threatened to escape. Not now. Not yet. She could grieve later after Viktor Sokolov was destroyed, after everyone who had ever hurt her paid for what they had done. The car arrived in 12 minutes, a black sedan with tinted windows and a driver who didn't ask questions. Genevieve climbed in, gave the address she had been told, and closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they had stopped in front of a nondescript apartment building in a quiet neighborhood. The driver handed her a key card and a burner phone. 3rd floor apartment 7B. There's food in the refrigerator and clean clothes in the closet. Security team will be here within the hour. Thank you. She climbed the stairs slowly, her body protesting every movement. The apartment was small, but clean, with bare walls and minimal furniture. A soldier's quarters designed for function rather than comfort. She locked the door behind her, activated the security system, and collapsed onto the couch. For a long moment, she just lay there staring at the ceiling. The events of the past 48 hours played through her mind like a nightmare she couldn't wake from. The ballroom, the explosion, the forest, that single final gunshot. Her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen. An unknown number. Her finger hovered over the reject button. Then she answered. Miss Hartwell. The voice was deep-cultured with an Eastern European accent that sent ice down her spine. I've been looking forward to this conversation. Viktor Sokolov. Genevieve sat up slowly, her hand tightening around the phone. How did you get this number? I have sources everywhere, Miss Hartwell. Surely you've realized that by now. He chuckled a warm, grandfatherly sound that made her skin crawl. I must say your performance in Atlanta was impressive. Theatrical perhaps, but effective. You destroyed that pathetic family in a single evening. I can appreciate that kind of ruthlessness. What do you want? Straight to business. I like that. Victor's voice hardened slightly. You have something that belongs to me, Miss Hartwell. A folder of documents that could cause me considerable inconvenience. You mean the evidence of your arms dealing your human trafficking, the dozens of politicians you've bribed? Genevieve's voice was steady, even though her hands were shaking. Is that what you're looking for? Among other things. Victor paused. I'm prepared to offer you a deal, Miss Hartwell. Return the documents, and I'll allow you to live. I'll even leave your little company alone. You can go back to your billions and your board meetings, and we'll pretend this unfortunate misunderstanding never happened. And if I refuse, then I will find you. I will take the documents by force, and I will make sure your death is slow enough that you have time to regret every choice that led you to this moment. His voice dropped to a whisper. I'm told you became quite close to my son during your time together. Perhaps I'll start with him. Let you listen while I... He's dead. The words came out flat, emotionless. Your men killed him in the forest this morning. Silence on the other end. Then softly. Did they... I heard the shot myself. And you saw the body. Genevieve felt her heart clench. What? My dear Miss Hartwell. Victor's voice was almost gentle now, like a teacher correcting a naive student. My son is many things, but he is not easy to kill. I trained him myself after all. If you didn't see a body, then you don't know anything. Hope flared in her chest, dangerous and desperate. She crushed it down. You're lying. You're trying to manipulate me. Perhaps. Or perhaps I'm telling you the truth because it serves my purposes. Victor chuckled again. Either way, you have 24 hours to return my property. After that, I will burn down everything you love, starting with that quaint little safe house in Vienna's 3rd district. The line went dead. Genevieve sat frozen, the phone still pressed to her ear. He knew where she was. He had known all along. The safe house wasn't safe. Nothing was safe, not anymore. She forced herself to move. Grabbed the folder, the burner phone, a jacket from the closet. She was at the door when it burst open. She raised her weapon finger on the trigger and stopped. Dominic stood in the doorway. He was covered in blood. His left arm hung at an awkward angle, clearly broken. There was a gash across his forehead that had soaked half his face in crimson. But he was alive. He was standing. He was looking at her with those storm-gray eyes that she had thought she would never see again. Dominic? His name came out as a whisper, a prayer, a sob all at once. You're alive. How are you? Later. He pushed past her, checking the windows, the corners, the exits. We need to move. They know this location. I know. Victor called. I heard. Dominic winced as he moved his broken arm. There's a car downstairs. Alexei's driving. We have maybe 5 minutes before they surround the building. Alexei survived. Barely. Dominic grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the door. We all survived, Genevieve, by the skin of our teeth, but we survived. They ran down the stairs together, Genevieve's hand locked in his. Every step sent pain shooting through her blistered feet, but she didn't care. He was alive. That was all that mattered. The car was waiting at the curb, engine running. Alexei was behind the wheel, his face pale and drawn, a bloody bandage wrapped around his shoulder. In now. He hit the accelerator before the door was fully closed, sending the sedan screeching down the narrow street. Where are we going? Genevieve asked, bracing herself against the seat as Alexei took a corner at 60 miles per hour. The airport, Dominic said. Private hangar, there's a jet waiting. A jet to where? The Carpathian Mountains. Dominic's eyes met hers. We're finishing this tonight, Genevieve. The summit is happening in 6 hours. If we're going to destroy the syndicate, it has to be now. You can barely stand. Your arm is broken. You've lost. I've lost nothing that matters. His good hand found hers, squeezed tight. I told you I would find you. I told you we would finish this together. I keep my promises. Dominic, do you trust me? She looked at him, bloody, broken, barely holding together, and felt something shift inside her chest. Not the cracking she had felt before when everything was falling apart. This was different. This was pieces coming together. This was becoming whole. Yes, she said. I trust you. Then trust me now. He leaned closer, his forehead resting against hers. We're going to walk into my father's castle. We're going to access his server. We're going to freeze every account, expose every crime, and burn his empire to the ground. His voice dropped to a whisper. And then we're going to walk out together, and we're going to spend the rest of our lives forgetting that any of this ever happened. That's a lot of promises. I have a lot to make up for. He kissed her forehead gently. 6 years of watching you from a distance. 6 years of wanting to say something and staying silent. I'm done being silent, Genevieve. The airport appeared ahead of them, a private facility on the outskirts of the city, away from the commercial terminals and the crowds. Alexei drove straight onto the tarmac, where a sleek Gulfstream jet sat waiting, its engines already warming. They boarded quickly, Dominic leaning heavily on Genevieve's shoulder as they climbed the stairs. Inside, a medic was waiting, a young woman with steady hands and no questions. She went to work on Dominic immediately, setting his arm, cleaning his wounds, administering painkillers that he waved away. "I need to stay sharp," he said. "Give me the minimum." "You need to stay alive," the medic countered. "Your body is in shock. If you don't rest, I'll rest when Viktor Sokolov is in handcuffs." Dominic stood up, testing his newly splinted arm. "How long until we reach the castle?" 2 hours, Alexei said from the cockpit doorway. "Maybe less if the weather holds." "Good." Dominic turned to Genevieve. "We need to go over the plan, every detail, every contingency." For the next 90 minutes, they strategized. Dominic drew diagrams of the castle's layout from memory, the entrances, the exits, the security checkpoints, the server room in the basement. Alexei filled in details about guard rotations and communication protocols. Genevieve contributed what she knew from her father's files, the names of syndicate leaders who would be at the summit, their rivalries, their weaknesses. By the time the pilot announced their descent, they had a plan. It was risky, complicated, and required everything to go exactly right. But it was a plan. "Remember," Dominic said as they prepared to land, "the goal is the server. We get in, we access the financial systems, we freeze the accounts. Everything else is secondary." "What about your father?" Dominic's jaw tightened. "If we encounter him, I'll handle it." "Dominic, he's my responsibility, Genevieve." His voice was hard, now edged with something dark. "I ran away from him 18 years ago. I've been running ever since. Tonight, I stop running." The plane touched down on a private airstrip in the Romanian countryside. Snow was falling heavily, reducing visibility to a few dozen meters. Perfect conditions for an infiltration. Alexei had arranged for a vehicle, a nondescript SUV with four-wheel drive and a trunk full of weapons. They loaded up in silence, the weight of what they were about to do settling over them like a shroud. "The service entrance is on the eastern wall," Dominic said as Alexei drove toward the mountains. "Deliveries come through there twice a week. The guards know the schedule, but they're lazy. They don't check credentials as carefully as they should. And if they do check, then we improvise." Dominic checked his weapon, a Heckler & Koch MP7 compact enough to conceal, powerful enough to punch through body armor. "The summit starts at midnight. By then, every major player in the syndicate will be in the Great Hall drinking Victor's vodka and pledging their loyalty. The server room will be minimally guarded." "How minimally?" 2 men, maybe 3. Dominic's voice was grim. "Alexei and I will handle them. You focus on the server." "I'm not a hacker, Dominic." "You don't need to be." He handed her a small device, a USB drive with a red band around the center. "This is a Trojan virus designed by the best cybersecurity team in Europe. Plug it into the server, let it run for 60 seconds, and it will automatically freeze every account connected to the syndicate's financial network. Simultaneously. Globally. And then we get out." Dominic's eyes met hers. "No matter what happens in that castle, Genevieve, the only thing that matters is getting you out alive. Understand? The only thing that matters is both of us getting out alive." She gripped his hand. "Promise me." "Genevieve." "Promise me, Dominic." He was quiet for a long moment. The SUV bounced over a rough patch of road, throwing them together in the darkness. "I promise," he said finally. "Both of us. Together." The castle emerged from the snow like a nightmare-made stone, a massive fortress of jagged towers and ancient walls perched on a cliff overlooking a frozen valley. Torchlight flickered in the windows, and guards patrolled the battlements, their breath misting in the cold air. Alexei stopped the SUV half a mile from the eastern wall, hidden in a grove of dead trees. "This is as close as I can get without being spotted," he said. "From here you're on foot." "You're not coming?" Genevieve asked. "Someone needs to keep the engine running." Alexei's voice was grim but steady. "If you're not back in 2 hours, I'm calling in every favor I have with Interpol and the Austrian Federal Police. They'll raid this castle at dawn." "If we're not back in 2 hours," Dominic said, "we'll be dead." "Then don't be dead." Alexei clasped Dominic's good arm. "I've waited 20 years to see Viktor Sokolov fall. Don't disappoint me." They moved through the snow in silence, Dominic leading with his weapon raised. The cold bit at Genevieve's exposed skin, but she barely noticed. Her entire focus was on the castle ahead, the fortress where Viktor Sokolov was celebrating his power, unaware that his empire was about to crumble. The service entrance was exactly where Dominic had said it would be, a small door set into the eastern wall, guarded by 2 bored-looking men smoking cigarettes. "Wait here," Dominic whispered. 30 seconds. He disappeared into the shadows. Genevieve counted her heartbeats, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then heard 2 soft thuds barely audible over the howling wind. Dominic reappeared, gesturing for her to follow. The guards were on the ground unconscious, their cigarettes still smoldering in the snow. They slipped through the door into a narrow corridor that smelled of old stone and kitchen grease. Servants hurried past, carrying trays of food and bottles of vodka, too busy to notice the 2 intruders in their midst. "The server room is 3 floors down," Dominic murmured. "This way." They descended through the castle's bowels, avoiding the main corridors where the summit guests were gathering. Twice they had to hide in alcoves while guards passed. Once they came face to face with a servant carrying a tray of glasses. But she just smiled nervously and hurried on, too frightened of the armed strangers to ask questions. The server room was at the end of a long, dimly lit hallway. 2 guards stood at attention outside the door, their weapons holstered but ready. "I'll take them," Dominic said. "When I give the signal—" "No!" Genevieve grabbed his arm. "Look." She pointed to a small camera mounted above the door, its red light blinking steadily. "If you attack them, security will be alerted within seconds. We'll never get to the server in time." "Then what do you suggest?" Genevieve thought for a moment. Then slowly she began to unbutton her coat. "What are you doing?" "Creating a distraction." She handed him the USB drive. "Give me 2 minutes, then get to that server." "Genevieve, trust me." Before he could stop her, she stepped into the hallway, walking directly toward the guards. They spotted her immediately, their hands moving to their weapons. "Stop," one of them barked in Romanian. "This area is restricted." Genevieve kept walking. Her hands raised her coat, hanging open to reveal the form-fitting dress beneath. "Please," she said, making her voice tremble. "I'm lost. I came to the party with my husband, but I got separated, and I don't know how to get back." The guards exchanged glances. One of them, younger with hungry eyes, stepped forward. "How did you get down here?" "I don't know. I was looking for the bathroom and I took a wrong turn and—" She let her voice break, tears welling in her eyes. "Please, can you help me?" The young guard looked at his partner, then back at Genevieve. His eyes traveled over her body, lingering in places that made her skin crawl. "I'll take her back," he said. "You stay here." "That's not protocol. She's just a lost woman. What's she going to do?" The young guard took Genevieve's arm, his grip too tight to be polite. "Come on, I'll show you the way." He led her down the corridor, away from the server room. Genevieve glanced back once, just long enough to see Dominic slip out of the shadows, moving toward the remaining guard with silent, deadly purpose. The young guard was talking, his voice too close to her ear. "You're one of Victor's guests. I haven't seen you before. I would remember a woman like you." "I'm new," Genevieve said. "My husband does business with Mr. Sokolov." "Lucky man." The guard's hand slid down to her waist. "Maybe when you're done with him, you could—" Genevieve moved. She drove her elbow into his solar plexus, doubling him over. Before he could recover, she grabbed his head and slammed it into the stone wall. He crumpled to the ground unconscious. She stood over him, breathing hard, her hands shaking. She had never done anything like that before. Had never hurt another person, not physically. It was easier than she expected. She ran back to the server room. The door was open now, the second guard sprawled on the floor beside his partner. Dominic was inside, standing before a wall of humming servers, the USB drive already inserted. 40 seconds, he said, watching the progress bar on a small screen. 35. Did it work? It's working. He turned to look at her, and despite everything, the blood, the danger, the impossibility of their situation, he smiled. You were amazing, by the way. I learned from the best. 20 seconds. His smile faded. When this is done, every account the syndicate has will be frozen. Every transaction will be flagged. Every dirty dollar will be traced. He paused. And my father will know exactly who did it. Good. Genevieve's voice was hard. I want him to know. 10 seconds. 5, 3, 2. An alarm began to wail. Red lights flashed in the corridor. Doors slammed in the distance. The sound of running footsteps echoed through the castle. They found us, Dominic said, yanking the USB drive from the server. We need to go. Now. They ran. The castle had become a labyrinth of chaos, guards rushing in every direction, guests screaming, the wail of alarms drowning out all other sound. Dominic led the way, his weapon raised, cutting down anyone who got in their path. The east entrance is compromised, he shouted over the noise. We need another way out. What about the Great Hall? That's where the summit is happening. There'll be 50 armed men in there. There'll also be 100 witnesses. Genevieve grabbed his arm, forcing him to stop. Think about it, Dominic. Your father can't shoot us in front of every crime boss in Eastern Europe. Not without explaining why. Not without admitting what just happened to his financial empire. Dominic stared at her. Then slowly he nodded. You're either a genius or completely insane. Probably both. She took his hand. Let's go. They burst through the doors of the Great Hall like avenging angels. The room fell silent. 100 faces turned toward them. Arms dealers, money launderers, corrupt officials, the scum of the continent gathered in one place. At the head of the hall, seated on what could only be described as a throne, sat Viktor Sokolov. He looked older than Genevieve had expected. Silver-haired, weathered, with the face of a man who had seen everything and been surprised by nothing. But his eyes, gray like Dominic's, burned with cold fury. Well, Viktor said, his voice cutting through the silence. This is unexpected. Dominic stepped forward, his weapon trained on his father's chest. It's over, Viktor. Your accounts are frozen. Your operations are exposed. By morning, every law enforcement agency in the world will have proof of your crimes. Is that so? Viktor didn't move. Didn't flinch. And you think that matters? You think money is my power? He laughed, a sound like breaking bones. I built this empire with my bare hands, boy. I can rebuild it the same way. Not from a prison cell. Who's going to arrest me? Viktor gestured at the room. These men. They owe me everything. The governments, I own half of them. His eyes found Genevieve, and his smile widened. Or perhaps you, Miss Hartwell, the billionaire princess who destroyed her husband's family for sport. I destroyed them because they deserved it. Genevieve's voice was steady. Just like you deserve what's coming. And what's coming exactly? Viktor rose from his throne, descending the steps with slow, deliberate grace. You've frozen my accounts. Impressive. But money can be unfrozen. Witnesses can be silenced. Evidence can disappear. He stopped 3 feet from Dominic, father and son, facing each other for the first time in 18 years. The only thing that can't be undone is death. He pulled a gun. Dominic moved faster. The shot went wide, shattering a chandelier and sending crystal raining down on the panicking crowd. Dominic tackled his father, the two of them crashing to the floor in a tangle of limbs and fury. Run! Dominic shouted at Genevieve. Get out of here! But she didn't run. She couldn't. She watched as father and son fought Victor clawing at Dominic's face, Dominic slamming his broken arm into his father's throat. It was brutal, primal years of hatred exploding into violence. Then Victor's hand found a knife. "Dominic!" Genevieve screamed. The blade plunged into Dominic's shoulder. He roared in pain, his grip loosening just enough for Victor to break free. The older man scrambled to his feet, knife in hand, blood dripping from the blade. "I should have killed you the day you were born," Victor snarled. "I saw the weakness in you even then. The softness. The pathetic need to be good." He raised the knife. "At least now I can correct my mistake." A gunshot echoed through the hall. Viktor Sokolov froze. He looked down at his chest at the red stains spreading across his white shirt. Then he looked up at Genevieve, at the smoking gun in her hands, at the woman he had dismissed as nothing more than a pawn. "You," he whispered. "Me." Genevieve's voice didn't waver. "You threatened to kill everyone I love. You bombed my home. You hunted me through the forest like an animal." She stepped closer, the gun still raised. "You made one mistake, Victor." "What mistake?" "You assumed I was just like everyone else." She watched the life drain from his eyes. "You assumed I would break." Viktor Sokolov collapsed. The great hall erupted into chaos. Crime bosses fled toward the exits, their bodyguards drawing weapons, everyone trying to escape the fortress that had suddenly become a trap. But Genevieve didn't notice any of it. She was already at Dominic's side, pressing her hands against the wound in his shoulder, trying to stop the bleeding. "Stay with me," she begged. "Dominic, please, stay with me." His eyes fluttered open. Despite everything, the blood, the pain, the chaos swirling around them, he smiled. "I told you," he whispered. "I keep my promises." Sirens wailed in the distance. The authorities were coming, the ones Alexei had called, the ones who would finally bring justice to the Serpent Syndicate. Help was on the way. But Genevieve didn't need help anymore. She had saved herself. So, the helicopter touched down on the roof of Vienna General Hospital at 4:47 a.m. Genevieve hadn't let go of Dominic's hand since they left the castle. Through the chaos of the Interpol raid, through the frantic medical evaluation in the helicopter, through the blur of lights and sirens and shouting voices, she held on. Her fingers were cramped, her knuckles white, but she didn't let go. "Ma'am, you need to step back." A trauma surgeon was running alongside the gurney, his face grim. "We need to get him into surgery immediately." "I'm not leaving him." "Ma'am, I said I'm not leaving him." The surgeon looked at her, at the blood covering her dress, the exhaustion carved into her face, the steel in her eyes, and something in his expression shifted. "You can wait outside the operating room, but you cannot come inside. Do you understand?" Genevieve nodded. She squeezed Dominic's hand one last time, felt the faint pressure of his fingers responding, and then they wheeled him through the double doors and out of sight. She stood there for a long moment, staring at the doors, her body finally registering the toll of the past 72 hours. Her legs buckled. She caught herself against the wall, sliding down until she was sitting on the cold tile floor. "Miss Hartwell." She looked up. Alexei was standing over her, his shoulder wrapped in fresh bandages, his face pale but alert. "The surgery will take several hours," he said quietly. "You should rest." "I can't rest." "Then at least eat something. Drink water." He held out a bottle. "Dominic would not want you to collapse." Genevieve took the water. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely unscrew the cap. "He's going to be okay," she said. It wasn't a question. It was a command, as if she could will it into truth. "He promised me. He promised we would both walk out of that castle." He kept his promise. Alexei sat down beside her, his back against the wall. "You both walked out. Everything else is just details." "Details?" She laughed, a broken, exhausted sound. "He has a knife wound in his shoulder. He lost so much blood. The doctor said he's strong, that he's a fighter." Alexei's voice was firm. I've known Dominic for 6 years, Miss Hartwell. I've seen him survive things that would have killed ordinary men. A knife wound will not stop him. How can you be so sure? Alexei was quiet for a moment. Then softly, because he has something to live for now. Genevieve looked at him. I've watched him for years. Alexei continued. Watched him guard you, protect you, keep his distance, even when it was killing him. He was a man without a future, without hope, just existing day after day, waiting for his past to catch up with him. He paused. But these past few days, I've seen something different. I've seen him smile. I've seen him fight for something other than survival. I've seen him become the man he was always meant to be. And what man is that? A man in love. Alexei's eyes were kind. He will not leave you, Miss Hartwell. Not now. Not after everything you've been through together. The hours crawled by. Genevieve didn't move from her spot outside the operating room. Alexei brought her food that she couldn't eat, coffee that she couldn't drink. Hospital staff came and went, casting curious glances at the blood-covered woman sitting on the floor, but no one asked her to leave. At 9:23 a.m., the doors opened. The surgeon emerged, pulling off his surgical mask. His face was tired but calm. Genevieve scrambled to her feet, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. He's stable, the surgeon said. The knife missed the major arteries. We've repaired the damage and stopped the internal bleeding. He'll need extensive physical therapy for the arm, but he should make a full recovery. Genevieve's knees gave out again. This time Alexei caught her. Can I see him? He's in recovery, still sedated. But yes, you can see him. The surgeon hesitated. Miss Hartwell, I don't know what happened to you two, and frankly, I don't want to know. But that man fought through surgery like he had somewhere to be, someone to get back to. He almost smiled. Don't make him wait too long. The recovery room was quiet, filled with the soft beeping of monitors and the gentle hiss of oxygen. Dominic lay in the hospital bed, his shoulder heavily bandaged, his face pale, but peaceful. He looked younger in sleep. The hard lines of his features softened, the constant vigilance finally at rest. Genevieve pulled a chair to his bedside and sat down. She took his hand carefully, mindful of the IV lines, and pressed it to her cheek. You scared me, she whispered. You scared me so much. No response. Just the steady rhythm of his heart on the monitor, proof that he was alive, that he was still here. I've been thinking, she continued, her voice barely audible, about everything that's happened, about the ballroom in Atlanta and the forest in Austria and that castle in the mountains, about all the things I said I wanted: justice, revenge, the satisfaction of watching them fall. She paused. I got all of it, Dominic, every single thing. But sitting here watching you breathe, I realized something. She leaned closer, her lips brushing his ear. None of it matters. Not the money, not the power, not the victory. The only thing that matters is this. You. Us. Being alive, being together, being free. Her voice cracked. I don't want to spend another day fighting Dominic. I don't want to build empires or destroy enemies or prove anything to anyone. I just want to wake up next to you, every morning, for the rest of my life. His fingers twitched in her hand. Genevieve pulled back, watching his face. His eyes were still closed, but there was movement behind his eyelids. Consciousness slowly returning from the depths of anesthesia. Genevieve. His voice was a rasp, barely audible. I'm here. She squeezed his hand. I'm right here. His eyes opened, slowly, painfully focusing on her face with effort. But when they found her, they softened. That hard, vigilant gaze that had watched over her for 6 years melted into something warm, something tender, something she had never seen before. You're crying, he murmured. I'm not crying. She was absolutely crying. It's been a long night. It's morning. Then it's been a long morning. He smiled, a small, exhausted smile that lit up his entire face. Come here. She leaned down, and he lifted his good arm, wrapping it around her shoulders, pulling her close. She rested her head on his chest, careful not to disturb the bandages, and listened to his heartbeat. Strong, steady, alive. "I heard what you said," he murmured against her hair. "About not wanting to fight anymore. About wanting to wake up next to me. You weren't supposed to hear that. Too late." His arm tightened around her. "And for the record, Genevieve Hartwell, I want the same thing. Every morning. For the rest of my life." She lifted her head, looking into his eyes. "Are you proposing to me in a hospital bed?" "I'm proposing to you wherever you'll have me." His voice was serious now, the lightness fading. "I've loved you for 6 years, Genevieve. I've watched you suffer, watched you hope, watched you break and rebuild yourself stronger than before. I've seen you at your lowest and your highest, and I have loved you through all of it." He reached up, brushing a tear from her cheek. "Marry me. Not because we survived something terrible together, not because we defeated our enemies or proved ourselves to the world. Marry me, because I can't imagine spending another day without you." Genevieve stared at him. At this man who had been raised by monsters and chosen to be good, who had spent 6 years protecting her without asking for anything in return, who had walked into his father's castle knowing he might not walk out just to keep her safe. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes. Yes, I'll marry you." She laughed through her tears. "I'll marry you in this hospital room if they'll let me. I'll marry you tomorrow or next week or next year. I'll marry you whenever, wherever, however you want." She kissed him softly, mindful of his injuries, but full of everything she had been holding back for so long. "Just don't ever leave me again." "Never," he promised against her lips. "Never again." 3 months later, the world had changed. The Serpent Syndicate was gone. The frozen accounts had led to a cascade of arrests across Europe. Politicians, law enforcement officials, business leaders, all of them exposed by the evidence Genevieve and Dominic had gathered. International courts were still processing the cases, but the verdicts were already coming in. Guilty, guilty, guilty. The Washington family had fared no better. Marcus was serving 25 years in federal prison for securities fraud, his appeals denied at every level. Walter had died of a heart attack 3 weeks after his arrest, collapsing in his cell before he could even be transferred to a proper facility. Lorraine was in a minimum security prison in Georgia, her Chanel suits replaced by orange jumpsuits, her social standing reduced to a cautionary tale whispered at Atlanta cocktail parties. And Jasmine Cole. The last Genevieve had heard, she was working as a waitress in a diner in New Jersey, her family's fortune seized by creditors, her dreams of marrying into wealth shattered along with everything else. Karma had come for all of them. But today, Genevieve wasn't thinking about karma. She was standing on the terrace of a villa in Santorini, watching the sun set over the Aegean Sea, feeling the warm breeze on her skin and the weight of a simple platinum band on her finger. "You're thinking again." She turned. Dominic was walking toward her, 2 glasses of wine in his hands. His shoulder had healed well. Physical therapy had restored most of his mobility, and the scar was fading. He moved easily now without the tension that had defined him for so long. He looked peaceful, happy. "I'm allowed to think," she said, accepting the wine. "I'm a businesswoman. Thinking is what I do." "You're supposed to be on your honeymoon. Thinking is prohibited." "Who made that rule?" "I did. Just now." He slipped his arm around her waist, pulling her close. "What were you thinking about?" Genevieve was quiet for a moment, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. "I was thinking about how strange life is. A year ago I was scrubbing floors in the Hamptons. Atlanta." "Atlanta, right." She smiled. "A year ago I was scrubbing floors in Atlanta, pretending to be invisible, hoping that someday my husband would notice me. And now..." She gestured at the view, the villa, the ring on her finger. "Now I'm here. With you. And everything that happened, all the pain, all the humiliation, all the terrible, awful moments somehow led me here." "Do you regret it?" "The pain." She considered the question. No, I don't think I do. It taught me things I needed to learn. About strength, about resilience, about what really matters. She turned to face him. I spent 3 years trying to make someone love me who was incapable of love. And when I finally stopped trying, when I finally let go, I found someone who had been loving me all along. Dominic's eyes softened. I should have told you sooner. You told me when you were ready, when we were both ready. She reached up, tracing the scar above his eyebrow. No regrets, Dominic. Not a single one. Not even for shooting my father. The question hung in the air. They had talked about it, of course, in hospital rooms and therapist offices and late-night conversations when neither of them could sleep. Viktor Sokolov was dead, killed by a woman he had dismissed as insignificant, and the weight of that still sat heavy on Genevieve's shoulders. He was going to kill you, she said quietly. He had the knife raised. One more second, and you would have been gone. She met his eyes. I would do it again, Dominic. 1,000 times. I would burn down the entire world to keep you safe. I know. He pulled her closer, his forehead resting against hers. That's why I married you. She laughed, a real laugh, bright and free, the kind she hadn't been able to make for years. I thought you married me for my money. I married you for your money, your power, your devastating intelligence, and your willingness to commit violence on my behalf. He grinned. The fact that you're beautiful is just a bonus. Flatterer. Realist. The sun touched the horizon, spilling gold and crimson across the water. They stood there together, watching it sink, two people who had walked through hell and somehow emerged on the other side. There's something I need to tell you, Dominic said after a while. That sounds ominous. It's not. At least I don't think it is. He hesitated. I heard from Alexei this morning. My mother wants to meet you. Genevieve blinked. Your mother? I thought she was in hiding in Geneva. She was. But with Victor gone and the syndicate destroyed, she doesn't need to hide anymore. Dominic's voice was careful, measured. She's been following the news. She knows everything that happened, and she wants to meet the woman who saved her son. I didn't save you. We saved each other. That's what I told her. He smiled. But she insists. She wants to cook us dinner. Apparently, she makes an incredible borscht. Genevieve thought about it. About all the conversations they had shared about Dominic's childhood, his father's cruelty, his mother's escape. About the woman who had been forced to leave her son behind to save herself, who had spent 18 years watching from a distance, hoping someday he would be free. I'd like that, she said finally. I'd like to meet her. Really? She's your family, Dominic, and you're my family now. She squeezed his hand. That makes her my family too. Something shifted in Dominic's face, a softening, a release of tension he had been carrying for so long, he probably didn't even know it was there anymore. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For being you. For seeing me when everyone else saw a monster's son. For giving me a reason to be something more. He kissed her forehead. For being my family. The sun disappeared below the horizon, leaving behind a sky painted in shades of purple and pink. The first stars were beginning to appear, tiny points of light in the gathering darkness. I've been thinking about something else, Genevieve said. More thinking I told you that's prohibited. This is important thinking. She turned to face him fully. Hartwell Global has been running itself for the past few months. The board is competent, the executives are loyal, and honestly, the company doesn't need me looking over its shoulder every day. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to do something different, something meaningful. She took a breath. I want to start a foundation for survivors. Women who've been trapped in abusive situations, who don't have the resources to escape, who feel like they're invisible and worthless and alone. Her voice strengthened. I know what that feels like, Dominic. I know what it's like to lose yourself, to forget your own worth, to wait for someone else to save you. And I know now that you have to save yourself. But sometimes you need help to realize that. Dominic was quiet for a long moment. Then, You want to help other women find their power. I want to remind them that they had it all along. Genevieve's eyes were bright. Every woman who's ever been made to feel small, who's ever been told she was nothing, they're not nothing. They're diamonds. They just need someone to help them see it. The Hartwell Foundation for Survivors. I was thinking something simpler. She smiled. The Diamond Project. Dominic laughed, a warm, genuine sound that she would never tire of hearing. It's perfect. And for what it's worth, I think it's a brilliant idea. You do? I do. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her. And I'll be right there with you, every step of the way. They stood there as night fell over Santorini, the stars multiplying above them, the sea whispering against the cliffs below. Two people who had lost everything and found each other. Two people who had walked through fire and emerged not unscathed, but stronger. Two people who had learned the hardest lesson of all, that love isn't something you find. It's something you build brick by brick, choice by choice, day by day. I love you, Genevieve said into the darkness. I love you too. Dominic's voice was warm against her ear. More than I ever thought I could love anything. Promise me something. Anything. Promise me we'll have boring days. She laughed softly. Promise me we'll have arguments about what to have for dinner and lazy Sundays, where we don't get out of bed. Promise me we'll have a life that's so normal, so wonderfully mundane, that we forget we were ever anything else. I promise. He kissed the top of her head. I promise you boring. I promise you mundane. I promise you every single ordinary moment for the rest of our lives. Good. She nestled closer to him. Because I've had enough extraordinary to last a lifetime. They stood there until the stars filled the sky, until the wine was gone, and the air grew cool, until there was nothing left to say, and everything left to feel. And in the morning they would wake up together, not as survivors, not as victims, not as victors, just as two people in love starting the first day of the rest of their lives. Genevieve Elena Hartwell had spent 3 years being invisible. She had scrubbed floors and served champagne and smiled through humiliation, waiting for someone to see her worth. But in the end, she hadn't needed anyone to see it. She had found it herself. And that made all the difference. Because diamonds don't need permission to shine. They don't need validation or approval, or someone else's love to know their value. They just are brilliant, unbreakable, eternal. And Genevieve had always been a diamond. She just needed to remember.